Drink with James, episode 140. 140 was also my weight class my senior year of wrestling. That fact has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but if we're playing loose association games, you say 140, I think about my senior year of high school weight class. The one before that, I was 112, and I didn't grow in between those years. If you want to think about how much weight I was cutting, I was 5'10", 110 pounds as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. It was unhealthy. I lost 4 teeth from malnutrition. I had 30 cavities after the season. Wrestling's great. If you guys have kids, you should have them wrestle. It's a very healthy sport that encourages body positivity. It doesn't. It's terrible and it's ruined my entire life, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. So, episode 140. It's sunny kind of out still. So it's nice. We're kind of like pulling ourselves out of the gloom. I feel like honestly this year in New York, the winter has been fairly mild, and I don't find myself as like hungry for spring because I just don't think we've gotten like beat up as bad as we have before. But happy to have the light coming back and actually see the sunlight more than 10, 15 minutes a day.
Here's something. We're counting down. We have a couple more shows in this office.
Right. Yeah, we only have a few more shows in this conference room. We are moving in 2.5 weeks. Team doesn't know this, but we might have to remove the walls of this place before then. We might potentially reusing these glass panels, so they might be coming and getting those before. So we could be here next week and have no glass. Every time the show happens, there'll be like less and less behind me. But that's been unbelievably stressful. Building this office has been hard. Let's just say that. It's been hard. But we'll be excited to move. So yeah, 2 more?
I don't know.
We're moving April 1st, so that's a Monday.
So 2 more. We'll have 2 more after this.
2 more after this, yeah. So 2 more in this office, and then we have a new location. Maybe. We'll see what happens. Okay. Let's just jump into questions. We got some fire today, I'm sure, but the intro is not going to be it. So, question number 1. You say the brand gets 100% ownership of your channel. They should be the only stories you post that day. Have you noticed that the less stories you post, the worse your stories perform? Good question. I had a few people reach out about this. I want to refine my position and explain myself a little bit better. I am not saying that if you were doing a post for a brand, that should be the only story that you do that entire day. I am saying that if you're doing a post for a brand and you're doing 2 story screens and you've done 20 that day, that you're probably doing that brand a disservice. And so there's a balance of like making sure that you are giving the brand the space and attention that they paid for without jeopardizing the performance of your feed on that day. So there is no magic, again, like I think as I said before, like there's no magic number of what exactly is right. It's just, I think, asking yourself, do I feel like if I was the brand and I paid for this, would I feel happy with it? Would I feel like it was well integrated into your day? And that's another thing. It's not just like how much or how little, how many or how few stories that you post that day in addition to your sponsored. For me, it's about how it integrates into the larger story of that day. And I think, as I said before, if it's like I'm at brunch and then boom, here's like a sponsored post, and then I'm at, meetings or running around or working out and it just goes on, then it does feel more like just a commercial where it shouldn't. It should feel engaging. And so like, I think thinking about that, and if it's a skincare post, making sure you're doing it in the time that you would normally be doing your skincare routine. Just being a little more considered about how you're integrating that brand into the day. Now, do I notice that the fewer stories you post, the worse they do? Not really. Again, it's kind of person to person. I think the thing that we are starting to track more and more is what is a person's average fall off rate on their stories. So if it's, if you did 5 stories in a day, how many views did you have in the first one versus the last one? Which for us is kind of telling us how engaged your audience is. Are they getting to your stories and just being like, nope, don't like this person, and doing a hard swipe over to the next person? Or do they sit and they watch every single one? Another thing to think about as far as sponsored stories goes is that, you need to think about how you are going to, again, create something effective for the brand and for your audience. So if the brand is giving you a link, a trackable link on your swipe up, what that should trigger in your brain is they are going to look at how many people swipe up on this story, right? And let's just say, to keep the math simple, they paid you $2,000 for a post and 10 people swiped up on your post, okay? Now they've paid $200 per visit. That is very expensive. If you think about average Facebook click-through, I think is, let's say it's $2 a click. So if you were going to perform as well as Facebook, for that same $2,000, you should get 1,000 visits. Now that would be pretty high for an influencer, but if someone's giving you a trackable link, know they are looking at that and know they are looking at how you did versus everyone else in the campaign. And it is pretty hard to justify a price if I'm looking at the trackable link and saying, oh, only 14 people swiped up and they have 100,000 followers. There's no one that's going to look at that and say, you did a great job. Think about your stories, especially if they have a swipe up, and ask yourself, how am I going to get people to flick their thumb up and check it out? Because your job is not to put the link in your story and hit publish. Your job is to get people to swipe on it. And I just think that fundamentally influencers misunderstand that. They think my job is to hit publish on my Instagram post and to hit publish on my story, and that is it, and is 100% not your job, right? Brands are paying you because they want the money they give you to turn into more money. If the money they pay you doesn't turn into more money, then they're never going to work with you again. And it is hard to track sales on Instagram, and I don't think Instagram is a good commerce platform in general. But looking at overall trends, if I'm a brand and I made $1 million last year and I spend $500,000 this year on influencers and I make $1 million again, do you think I'm going to spend $500,000 again the next year on influencers? No. And that is existentially the biggest threat to this entire industry, is that this stuff stops working or it gets too expensive for it to be justified. And I think influencers, again, just fundamentally don't understand their larger role in advertising campaigns and what they need to be thinking about when they hit publish, which is, how am I getting people to, one, go to this place and eventually buy this thing? And before you go and hit publish, how we always say, ask yourself if this is going to, be of benefit to your audience. Is it going to educate them, inspire them, or entertain them? Right? Also ask yourself, if this is a sponsored post, do I think I'm doing a good job of selling this? And is this, the way I talked about this, going to create some kind of action in my audience? It is fundamental to your job. You're a salesperson. You're being paid to sell shit, and you need to be considering this. Okay, question number 2. So the question was actually, are influencers over 40 on our radar, and some suggestions for influencers who are operating in the food segment. And, I'll kind of blow that out to kind of talk about niches in general? One, short answer to the first part of the question, we definitely are looking at influencers with older audiences. A lot of the purchasing power in the United States is locked up in, people that are over the age of 40. Those audiences are increasingly coming to Instagram a little late, and those audiences are generally smaller, but we're finding that they operate and act a lot like influencer audiences used to years ago. They're more engaged, they're more ready to buy. They're ready to buy, they're ready to swipe up, they're like excited. And so we are finding a lot of effectiveness working with older influencers, and it's definitely a place we're watching. It's something we're really excited about. So that's just like, absolutely, if anyone's watching the show and you're over 40, keep going. I think the next couple of years are going to be great for, influencers who are over 40 as far as like the volume of brand deals that start coming in, because it's just this very interesting untapped market that is full of people ready to take their wallet out, which is a marketer's dream, really. So speaking of other niches in general, I think that, again, there's this thought that like everything's been done and there's no space for you to come and do something interesting. When I thought of food, I initially thought of Infatuation, which I'm sure you guys have heard of. It was a blog started by a couple guys who were in the music industry, and now, quite a big business, and they bought Zagat Guide recently. But when they launched, they weren't doing anything different. They were doing food reviews. They were doing them in their voice. And they had a little bit of differentiation as far as like tagging restaurants as like, being big for good groups or big for people watching. And in general, I think they focused a little less on the food than a normal food review would, and more on the experience of dining out in that place. One of my things that got me reading Infatuation was their review of Raoul's, which is one of my favorite restaurants in the city. And the first line is like, if you can't have a good time at Raoul's, you're an asshole. Which would just not be in a normal food review, but it was just a food review site. And so I think that, again, there's this potential frustration of everything's been done, but the guys who started that, it wasn't innovative. I mean, it's just a fucking food review site. There's nothing different about it, really. It's just that their voice and their point of view is different, and it's become this big thing. And so there is always an opportunity in any of these niches to do something. And the other thing I think with Infatuation specifically is they're a food brand, but most of the advertising that they seem to work with is lifestyle brands, because food has become such a part of lifestyle, and that's not become, obviously food's always been pretty important to people's lives and, living, but interesting that when you see the people that they work with, the brands that they work with, it's generally not people in the food space. So I think that again, if you're a travel influencer and you're frustrated because it's harder to make money, I do think there is a way to cross verticals and start integrating other things. If you're a travel influencer, can you work with beauty or fashion brands? Absolutely. It's just I think you have to be a little more aggressive in getting those people to come to you because they're not thinking of you, and obviously Infatuation is now quite big and they're a very hip company right now. But I imagine in the beginning they were doing a lot of pitching. Amex wasn't just coming to them being hey, I want to do this big thing. They were probably saying hey, we have this really exciting thing happening and it's involving food and people and all this thing. And you can kind of pull your lifestyle brand into this in a really exciting way. So if you're in a niche that is kind of outside of the verticals that are pulling a lot of money in for influencers right now, I think you can think about how can those brands work with you. And as always, think about what you're doing different. What is the thing that you're doing that no one else is doing? Because there is always room to just reinvent an existing business, right? Again, Infatuation is a reinvention of a Zagat Guide. Funny that they ended up buying it. Tesla is just a reinvention of Ford. Amazon is probably in some ways a reinvention of of a, like Walmart, right? Like it's the same thing, just done in a little different way. So there's always room for you. There's always room to kind of do something interesting, but you have to be doing it in a way that is different and unique to you. I think long term, if I was not in any niche, I would worry about being too replaceable. Because infatuation is built on their like tone of voice and their perspective of the world, they can't be replaced, right? Because they own that whole way of talking about restaurants. So they have a really good like defensible position as far as a business goes. If your brand, and that brand can be your Instagram feed, is just like plain white toast, okay? Nobody's mad about toast, but like not a lot of people are super passionate about it either. That's actually probably not true. People do really like toast, but probably not white toast. You have to worry about being replaced easily. You become interchangeable with a lot of people. Things start to kind of like commoditize and prices fall, right? If you're not in a niche and you don't have something super specific that is specific to you, then people can kind of price shop and say, okay, I'm looking for like an LA blogger who's like, wearing high pony and Adidas track pants all the time. And it's like, okay, there's 1,000 of those. So, you can kind of price shop a little more than you could if you have something really specific and unique that you do, because you can kind of hold your ground and say, this is me. And if you want me, you have to pay a premium for that. So. Question number 3, is it important as an influencer to have interactions with brands even if you are represented? Yes. Next question. No. It is 100% important for all influencers to have relationships with brands, especially as you get bigger and you're represented. Let's say you have 500,000 followers and you're paying $5,000 for a post, right? And I reach out to you and your agent responds and we negotiate and you post and great, cool. I've just given you $5,000 and you can't even be fucking bothered to answer an email and just say like, this is so exciting. I love the brand so much. I'm going to kick you over to my agent and like hope this works out, blah, 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 blah. I think that like as an influencer, you need to insist on having the relationship because that is really all you have. And again, like as we were talking before about this stuff becoming commoditized, don't fool yourself in thinking that the influencer space is not going to be commoditized. And as supply rushes into the market as it is right now, individual demand for each individual influencer will fall in accordance with how much supply is going up. And so your ability to continue to do what you do and charge your rates will be predicated on 1, your ability to create action and actually get your audience to do something, and 2, your relationship with those brands, right? And so like you need to congruently be working on both of those things. And it is just so irresponsible to not have a direct relationship with the brands, and this is the whole joy of having an agent, is that they get to be the bad guy who pushes on the contract terms, who pushes on the price, who pushes on the amount of deliverables and how long you have to be at the events and all of that stuff. And you get to be the fun one who, once a year you go out to dinner or drinks with them, you send them, champagne when you see that they got engaged, you comment on their, again, how many times do you have to say it? Like follow your brand contacts on Instagram and comment on their shit. This is very simple. This is like very, very simple. And you have 500,000 followers and you're commenting on their photos and all their friends are like, oh my God, that influencer is like, you guys know each other? Like, oh yeah, we work together. It's no big deal. Like that's a moment for the person at that brand that is cool that you can create 20 times a day very easily. You could follow all your brand contacts and mute them. And then once a week, go into the accounts that you muted, go in, interact a little bit, do some commenting, boom, done. This is an hour of your life, people, and I promise it will bear fruit. So if you have an agent and you are not maintaining your brand relationships, you need to rapidly change that. If your agent is keeping you from those brand relationships, fire them without question. Don't hesitate, just done. Because if you stop working together, they take those relationships with them to wherever they go next. You don't get to keep them. So you need to make it a big part of what you're doing. I don't know what percentage of your time you should be spending doing this, but if it was less than 10%, I would be alarmed. So that's the show, people. I was invited by my friend to go eat a 21-course Scandinavian dinner. So I'm gonna go gnaw on some chicken feet and whatever other strange things he's going to feed me, but it will be great. So goodbye.